Good evening, everyone. I think everyone has been admitted. Just making sure. Nice to see you all. I am so glad you could come tonight to join us. I'm Trisha Kwan. I see some names there that I recognize. Yay. Good to see you all tonight. I'm delighted to be here with you tonight. We have a monthly webinar series. If you've ever been before, then you probably already know about it. And tonight we're honored and fortunate to have one of the founder of the multi-literacies lab here to talk to us about some of her research. And I just want to introduce her because I have to tell you, she's just so amazing and she's done so many things. So I'm just going to give you some of the highlights about Dr. Smith. And if you're a new student here with us, I don't know if you might not have Dr. Smith yet, but you will because she teaches a few classes here in the school library certification program at UNT. So let me tell you a little bit about her. Dr. Smith is a professor in the information science department here at the University of North Texas, and she's been a faculty member since 2010. She also holds a PhD in information studies and a master's degree in library and information studies, both from Florida State University. Dr. Smith is also our Hazel Harvey Peace Endowed Professor in Children's Library Services. This professorship honors Hazel Harvey Peace, who was an educator, an activist, and a community leader. Dr. Smith serves as the Information Science PhD Program Director. And now you want to remember that because when you're done with your master's degree, you want to come and do a PhD. So just remember who you need to contact. Dr. Smith is the head of that program as well here at UNT. She's also the founding director of the UNT Multiple Literacies Lab, and this webinar is part of what that Multi Literacies Lab does. She is also the Association for Library and Information Science Education Director of Membership. She also has many other leadership accomplishments. She's a three-term ALA counselor at large. She's the founding co-chair of the ALA Conduct Committee, and she's the former chair of the American Association of School Librarians, Educators of School Librarians section. She presents at conferences a lot. She is highly published. she's like a publishing um she's just on fire, y'all. It's like you say, how does she do all that? There's a song I think about that. How does she do all that? I don't know because she has so many amazing accomplishments. Her previous experience includes being a youth services librarian, a school librarian, and a public school social studies and reading teacher. Her recent research and projects include exploring aspects of school librarianship development, youth and information seeking behaviors, and STEM skill acquisition in K 12 schools. She has also served as a grant evaluator at the National Science Foundation for Grants, and she is a principal investigator for an IMLS Institute of Museum and Library Services project called School Librarians Facilitating the Success of English Language Learners. Okay, like it could take the whole hour just to tell you everything that Dr. Smith has done because she's so fabulous. But tonight she's here to talk to us a little bit about her toolkit. We're excited to hear more. So I'm going to go ahead and let her get to it and start talking. But thank you guys so much for being with us. We're delighted to see you. Hello, Dr. Smith.
Hi, thank you. That was a really nice introduction. And I have to tell you that Dr. Kwan is amazing herself. In fact, I think a lot of our professors work hard, especially our school librarianship professors. I'm really honored that you all are here tonight to listen to me talk. And I'm hoping to get some information from you too, because this is an ongoing project and I might need your help to finish. So tonight, I will show you some clips, some things that you might be interested in, and the toolkit. So, my presentation tonight is a school librarian toolkit for facilitating the success of English learners. And I will say that sometimes we use several um, different terminologies for saying English learners. You'll see ELL, you'll see emerging bilinguals, for example. I think one of the nicest terms that you can use is English learners. The grant was written as ELL. Sometimes we hear ESL or ESOL. Um, English for speakers of other languages or English as a second language. And when I wrote the grant, I wrote English learners, but then the politically correct way to say the terminology would be English learners because our students who are learning English are actually amazing. It takes a lot to learn English, and I'll show you a clip later on about learning other languages, but it takes a lot to learn English because of the different types of vernaculars that we have and the slang that we incorporate. In fact, I was so inspired by this project, I decided to take linguistics classes, which are helping me a lot. So let's not think of them as English language learners because they already have language, even though you'll see those terms interchangeably in the literature and throughout this presentation as well, and in the toolkit. So I'm wondering, I see all of your amazing faces, even though I have my camera off. And I just want to know who is with us tonight. If you could just type it in the chat for me, I really would appreciate it. Um, who are you? Don't be shy. A little interaction keeps you from going to sleep, by the way. And while you're telling me who you are, um, I want to acknowledge that I'll show their pictures later, but I had some wonderful students help me to make this presentation. As a matter of fact, we presented at LibLearnX on Sunday. Okay, let's see, who are we? Vanessa from San Antonio, Nabil from El Paso, Elva. Okay, Carrollton. So a lot of Texas people. You know, later on, I'm going to have more presentations, and I hope to spread this out throughout the country. Do any of you have experience working with English learners? Carla says, thank you for covering EB students, emerging bilinguals. My school's population is 85%. Yes, things are really changing, right? They're heating up. And I'll tell you about why we started this grant. Yes, some of you are taking classes with me. Thank you. Wow, 98%. Okay. 98% of EL students. So, what do you want to know about English learners? And then we have someone who taught abroad. Yes, I want to know. I'm writing your name down because I want some information from you later on. 7 years of English. Okay. Oh, wow. I love this. Melly, if I say your name's wrong, forgive me. I slaughter names and I don't mean to. I'm currently an ESL teacher and I have 8 language learners right now. geography. I would like resources to be able to assist them. I can help with that. How can I encourage our students to enjoy reading and learn language? I have a video clip about that tonight. All right. So thank you all for sharing with me. Okay, so these are the students that worked with me, and they are all ABD. I'm so proud of them. That means all but dissertation, and in a little while, they'll be teaching more classes for us. But um, actually, 3 out of 4 of them are involved in teaching classes now at UNT. But they helped me with this presentation and creating the toolkit. So let's talk about this grant. So we have 3 project investigators involved in the grant. There's me, you know about me now. And then there's Dr. Tyler Wood, who is absolutely amazing. She works downstairs in Discovery Park and she does learning technology. And she's also an educational psychologist and she integrates technology into learning. And then we have Dr. Sean Zhang, who is in our linguistics department and he helps or he studies English as a second language, much like Dr. Krashen, who I will tell you about later on. Has anybody heard of Stephen Krashen before? Dr. Kwan has. That's someone you want to know about. Wonderful. So why did this grant come about? Well, first of all, I knew that I personally needed help. As I explained, I am a former school librarian, or as Dr. Kwan explained, I'm a former school librarian, and it's story time now. So once we had an English learner, I worked in Florida, and as you know, in Florida, there can be a migrant population. And I worked in a school library, and we didn't have adequate teachers who spoke Spanish in the school, and we only had one teacher, ESL teacher, and we shared her with another school. And I noticed this student whom I felt, was sort of being labeled as being bad because he wasn't engaged. But what it really was that nobody could speak to him. It was full immersion. There wasn't a second class or a separate class for him. And of course, there was library time. But there are certain things throughout my career that always stand out to me. But the one thing that really bothered me was this student who was being labeled as being bad because he couldn't understand what was happening. And um, he was immersed and no one was engaging him. So fast forward, we're here, and the pandemic started. And basically a lot of things came up, but one of those things that I looked up that just kept flashing by was the fact that there weren't enough resources when we needed to teach online. And quite frankly, when it comes to providing services for English learners, some some teachers in the regular classroom don't actually know what to do if they have an English learner who is assigned to them, because there are entire degrees for this subject area. So it's not necessarily something that school librarians learn. I don't think that we are teaching about this. Of course, we teach about how to provide services for all of our students and how to be inclusive, but a lot of us are not bilingual and don't have the certification, the ESOL certification. So I remembered that story and I thought this would be a good thing to study, because if our regular students, our domestic students who are native English speakers are falling behind, I can't imagine what's happening with our English learners. So I got together with Dr. Tyler Wood and Dr. Sang, and we formed this advisory board and wrote a grant. So I'm not going to tell you everybody's name and specialty, but holistically, we have amazing people here who know how to use technology. They speak several languages. They specialize in leadership development, interacting with school administrators, school librarianship, makerspaces, computational learning, just several different areas that we really needed, and also learning sciences. So we formed this group, and then we partnered with the International Association of School Librarians to disseminate the results. And here we are today with this grant funded by IMLS. So the objective of the grant is to engage experts to understand how to enhance services for English learners in school libraries. So one thing is, for me, I don't know about you all, the older I get, the more I learn, the more I understand that I need to learn more. I also learned that experts also need help from other experts to have the best services for their audiences. So when I say I wanted to engage experts, I meant that I wanted to engage experts throughout the country to help improve the services that we offer. Goal one is to create a toolkit with resources and research-based strategies that school librarians can use for assisting English learners. And secondly, another goal would be to develop a white paper with an action plan for future school librarian training and serving ELs in school libraries.
Dr. Smith, I'm so sorry to interrupt. We're seeing your desktop. I don't know if you're looking at your presentation and we're just not seeing it. I just in case I wanted to say something, in case you wanted us to be seeing that instead.
Well, that's crazy. I thought I've been talking for the
There
past
it
18 minutes and showing you a presentation.
is.
You
There
know,
it
that's really yucky.
is.
Oh, if this doesn't move forward anymore, you guys need to tell me.
We
Yeah,
will tell you. Yeah.
I had share on.
Your desktop is lovely, but I was like, I think maybe she started her presentation and we're not seeing it. So good, you're good now.
Oh,
We see.
definitely. I have slides. Oh, I wish you had told me like 18 minutes ago.
It's only been maybe 10. But
It's
yeah,
been a long time.
minute.
Anyway, so let me go back. We're going to have to clip this video. The objectives of the grant were to engage experts to understand how to enhance services for English learners in schools. Secondly, we wanted to create a toolkit of resources. That's what we'll be talking about tonight. And we wanted to develop a white paper with an action plan. So if you're a school librarian and you want to do something new in your school, but you're not sure where to start at, this action plan and this white paper that tells you the current state and where we should move forward with supporting our learners should be helpful. So we did a pilot study in order to implement this grant. And in this pilot study, we talked with 107 pre-service current and school librarians. A lot of them were in their master's degree programs, and a lot were certified. So 93.9% of the people who answered wanted to learn more about how to assist English learners in libraries, much like you all. This is something that was interesting to me. We used the Likert scale, and 1 was the lowest score, and 5 was the highest score. And we asked people to score themselves on their knowledge of historical and contemporary perspectives on culturally diverse education. A majority of the people scored themselves between 1 and 3, so very little knowledge to neutral. I'm not sure if I have enough. 79.47% of the participants indicated that they had some level of difficulty using technology in the library to enhance learning opportunities specifically for English learners. So there's just some things that we might use in general, but the question is, how do we tease out those resources that we need that can help English learners specifically? There are a lot of tools that are available, but we often overlook them because we don't know that they're available. Now, 61.68% is a majority, right? But we asked how many people had knowledge of customs, beliefs, and values of different racial groups and ethnicities. And 61.68% said they did. That's great, but that's a little a little over 38%, let's say, a little over 1/3 of people who said that they weren't able to do this. So 1 in 3 people in this room have problems or have issues with the customs and beliefs and values, their knowledge thereof, in regards to different racial groups and ethnicities. So we definitely want to be able to free ourselves up and to learn how to think more holistically. And then a majority of people said they needed a better understanding of how to develop an integrated multicultural lesson plan for English learners. So real world applications. A lot of you answered, and some of you said that 85% and up to 95% of your schools were actually had populations of English learners or large populations of English learners. So if you look at this map from the the National Center for Educational Statistics, you'll see that our English learner population is growing. So here in Texas, 21% of all public school students are English learners, and then there's 17% in California. I'm just rounding up or rounding down, and about 16% in New Mexico, right? And if you were looking at the current events, a lot of things are happening. So I'm sure these numbers went up. And they have real world circumstances and implications for us. The Education Department releases a new toolkit to engage English learner families. They did that in December. When COVID started, there was a report that was circulated explaining how there weren't enough resources for English learners from the Department of Education. Then another headline we have is Chicago is seeing an influx of migrant students. Are schools ready to serve them? Texas is sending asylum seekers to major cities by bus with little notice. These mayors want to pump the brakes. And recent immigrant children, a profile of new arrivals in the United States. So we're growing, and our educational system needs to grow with us. Let's see if I can get this video to play. I think you might find this interesting. Let me know if you can hear this, please. Can you see a video? Okay. And by the way, this is IJ, and she's one of our students, but she is from Nigeria, and she's explaining that English learners, sometimes they speak English. As a matter of fact, there are different types of English. I don't know if you all are aware of that, even within the United States. We laugh all the time. Does anybody remember Fire Marshal Bill? It's on Saturday Night Live. Maybe
Yes,
before,
I do. Yeah.
You remember that? Okay. Um, Maybe we can find a clip about it before we go, but he would say, and this all runs together. Let me tell you something, right? But if you're not an English speaker, all the words are running together and you don't really know what the person is saying. And that frequently happens. But here's IJ's clip.
Facilitating English language learning is a very central initiative with far-reaching benefits. I approached this project with not just from the perspective of a researcher, but also from the viewpoint of an immigrant parent. I consider English language learning not just for people whose second language is English, but also for special cases, which I'm about to describe. I consider my son one of those special cases, and I would explain what I mean by that. You see, my husband and I, we immigrated from Nigeria. Nigeria is a country in West Africa. Our official language is British English. We are taught with British English. That is what we speak at work, just general communication. But then there are the people who don't have formal education, they speak what we term broken English. That is a special Nigerian version of English, sort of what you see with the Jamaicans. You hear them speak Patois. Patois is their special and their own version of English. So um, we also, my husband and I are Igbos. So Nigeria is a country with so many tribes, different languages, so many I've lost count. And though we're both Igbos, we speak different dialects, different versions of Igbos. So my son, within his first 4 years, had been exposed to 3 different continents. He had been in UK, hearing the very core British English, even with the Scotland version. If you know Britain, you will know that the English people speak different from the Scottish people. So he's had all these versions of English. He's had the American English. Back home, his grandma is speaking, Igbo version that is different from what I would speak. And then, all this confusion here and there, different languages. But that's what I'm driving at. And so by the time he started pre-K in America, he was speaking the English he hears his parents speak. And he had to unlearn terminologies to, to begin to speak the English he hears in school. So he had to unlearn things like biscuits. We say biscuits, Americans say cookies, we say sweets, Americans say candies, even spellings and words like learned. Americans say learned with ed. We say learned with t. So these are special cases of English language learning that I'm hoping to bring to the forefront for librarians and for educators who are facilitating this English language learning. So you are aware that there are differences in terminologies, there are differences in pronunciations and general expressions of English. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and it's been a pleasure working on this grant.
So that's one perspective on English learners. So our project implementation. It was set up in 3 phases. First, we had a pre-form, and in this pre-form, we established an interdisciplinary team. So these were linguists, English learner community members, public librarians, educational technologists, teachers, and school librarians, and also school administrators. And this is a bit of a breakdown, but the bottom of this chart is cut off. And then we had a panel during the pre-form that told us about what it is to be successful working with English learners, and also their experiences with working with English learners. I'll play a small clip from Mr. Guerrero.
because I'm the only, this special situation, I'm the only Latino and Spanish speaking at school, native Spanish speaker. So of course my ELs, they tend to gravitate to the library. So it's always, a fun place to be. One thing that I love is like at the beginning of the year when I have my new kids, I go into Google Earth and start looking. I keep asking them, where are you from? What town are you from? And we go in Google Earth and we can look exactly like what school they were at, their neighborhood, in their country. And that makes them, it opens their eyes. I see them. And that's how we start building that relationship, or I start building relationship with them because I know exactly where they're coming from and where they are. And I'm a middle school librarian, so we're on a flex schedule. Like we don't do like elementary schools, but I work a lot with makerspace because I like the engagement where we build things and we create all this crazy stuff at the library. So that I think that's why they think it's a fun place to be. And then at the same time, that's how I push in my book clubs and book clubs in Spanish and let's read in Spanish. Because I don't want them, I guess as a native speaker, I don't want them to lose that reading is reading, you're reading in English or Spanish, so I push a lot into reading in their native language. I think that's ideal. And one that Karen just mentioned about the pandemic, something we did that I feel real proud. We did this during the pandemic, this cooking, it was like a cooking programming where we were able to bring the abuelitas. They were in Ecuador, they were in different countries, and they were making tortillas with our kids, and we could see them with their families. So we all had a wonderful night together, just with our families that were in the U.S. I think those, that makes them feel included in their school. This is that we're all part of it. I think that that's why I love it. It's such a special situation that I have at school, and that's thanks.
Okay, so as you can see, he goes out of his way to make connections with the students and to bring in the family aspect and to ask them about their cultures and their backgrounds. And I will show you how to get to these videos. So that's what we did during the pre-form. And then we had a forum where we also provided training and hosted a discussion about what English learners need. And this helped us to identify some of the best practices for implementing programming for English learners. And here we have Stephen Krashen, who's a linguist and a prolific writer. I don't know how he writes so much, but he's also a theorist in language acquisition. And he's a very candid person when he speaks, but very personable. But let's see. Let me see if I can find his clip. He talks about how he brings in the school library or our role in language acquisition, but also he speaks about his own struggles with learning another language, which may help to put language acquisition into perspective. Let me see if I can find that clip about him learning another language. If not, I'll move back on to the library perspective.
Let me talk a little bit about comprehensible input. What are some of the characteristics? Number one, we've just discovered this kind of embarrassing. The input has to be interesting, all right? We've been violating this for decades. Language classes are so boring, my goodness. I took French in high school. This is true confession time. Today, I speak French pretty much okay, all right? It's one of my better languages. When I took French in high school, it was all grammar. Teacher was a really nice guy, but he had no idea. Nobody did in those days. The teacher had a conference with me after 2 years. And he said, I'm going to give you a passing grade, but you don't deserve it. I'm going to pass you only because if I fail you, it's going to spoil your record. You'll never get into college. And the rest of your classes are pretty much okay, your rest of your grades. He saved me. So the class was absolutely terrible. So were most classes not very interesting. We have discovered that the input has to be interesting so people will pay attention to it. Some of you realize I'm coming close toward beginning to talk about reading. Of course,
So I think that what he says is so important because I'll go back to the previous presenter. He noted that he makes the experiences interesting for the students by bringing in their cultures and embracing everyone's uniqueness. So school libraries are a wonderful place for experiential learning. And one thing that helps us is the fact that it's more of a laid back environment. We can still do our formative and summative assessments, but we don't have to make it punitive. As he noted, I took like 10 years of languages myself, and I can barely recognize words now. I get some of them, but not all. So we have to work on how we're teaching our students, and school librarians can play a major role. And then this is part of how we can help. Let me get to clip 48.
we talk about these stories to this day. And in case you think this is a case of arrested development, you're still reading stories to him and he's 18 years old. He's now a college Dr. Gratian because he's the real one. Different people, different ages. I just finished a working paper submitted to publication yesterday about some research. What happens when you take adults who have what are called cognitive decline, adults in their 60s and 70s,
Sorry,
and you start reading stories for use of all ages. Who knows? We all like doing it. Okay, let's talk about application. The application is from my colleague, Beniko Mason. She has developed a method called story listening. One of many methods of doing this. I think this is the best one. She selects stories that are, in her terms, have stood the test of time. Grimm's fairy tales. She developed this telling stories to beginning and low intermediate students in a local university near where she lives, where she teaches in Japan. So these were students in Japan with English as a foreign language. She goes through the stories before she presents them, picks the parts that she thinks will be a little bit difficult, and makes what she calls a prompter. She's prepared to give a little more context. She'll draw pictures. She's very good at drawing this stuff. She'll do more paraphrasing. If necessary, occasionally she might do a quick translation into Japanese. What has she found? Really impressive results. She does not tell the students, pay attention to this new vocabulary. She says, just try to understand. That's why I'm explaining the words. You don't have to write them down, make flashcards. She then, several weeks later, occasionally gives them a surprise test on the vocabulary, just for our purposes. Guess what? They acquire a fair number of words. They're better off using that time to hear more stories than doing drills and exercises. We tried this. We tried telling a story, taking those words and give them a few, draw a line from the word to the definition, write 3 sentences with every word, etc. Get a little bit of growth, not much. You're better off listening to another story. Big conclusion. Beginning language teaching is story time. That's what it is. Can you imagine you go to ESL or French class and you hear some nice stories? That's class. You don't do it once for one story. You do it 2-3 semesters. So they hear hundreds of excellent stories, and we see much better performance than we ever did. Well, stories, the story session time is the warm-up for the next stage in the conduit, and that is actual reading. Dr. Mason has developed a method called guided self-selected reading. This is largely for adult students through graded readers, which I've been doing in Spanish, which has been, as I told you before, extremely interesting. I did it last night, etc.
I will stop the clip here. But the point of this whole thing is, you know how people come into the library or your students come into the library and they select the books that they actually want to read. And then you either help them connect to the ebook so that it plays the story for them so that they can learn the words. Or maybe you make a recording yourself so that they can hear the words, or you're just having story time with them. Those things that we do are very important and they support student learning. So be very wary when you have a teacher that says that the student only needs to select a book that's on their reading level. Try to make it possible for them to take other books that might be of interest, or to connect your students with the online resources and libraries that can read the stories to them. So we are teaching acquisition skills, language acquisition skills. Okay, so here are some suggestions pertaining to the skills that librarians need to learn. For example, people said creating safe spaces where students don't feel mocked when they speak, using communication methods such as audio and visual tools, providing videos. It's good to add the captions to the videos so that students have them. For example, sometimes I go to the Spanish channel and all I do is read while people speak. That helps our students too. Conflict resolution is important. Problem-solving techniques, creating student advisory boards, community outreach, learning to network, developing inclusive learning environments, foreign language collection development, and sheltered instruction strategies. During the forum or after the forum, we did get this feedback for some things that our participants like. For example, one person said, Jessica Zacharias had the wonderful idea of using sentence stems as a poster to help emerging bilinguals. Gina had the great advice of using multilingual, visual heavy instructions for makerspaces. I want to do both. Also, I want to be aware of the emerging bilingual cultural population I serve. It is so much more than Spanish. So I can be proactive and aware to create an inclusive environment. I'm also going to improve and boost my signage. By the way, a lot of people are mistaken when they believe that Spanish is the only language that is important. There are all types of languages that come from all over the world. Our immigrants can be from many different countries, not just Mexico. That is a misconception that we addressed in the forum. Thank you, Sarah. In fact, Sarah says students at my school speak 14 different languages and Spanish isn't in the top 5. Right. Thank you for sharing that. Here are some suggestions for our toolkit content. So I must say, let me rewind here. These suggestions for training for school librarians, that's something that we'll get to work on at a future date. But right now, we're focusing on suggestions for the toolkit. So that other slide will be for a future grant. But in terms of the toolkit content, some people ask for foreign language vendors, library signage in multiple languages, directions for evaluating EL-friendly resources, success stories, translation websites, student-friendly tutorials in different languages, YouTube read-alouds, makerspace items for ELs, and programming ideas. I will say that we're trying to grab the things that people ask for the most and put them into the toolkit. So some of them might not make it there, but there are a great deal of them there. We have a comment. Carla says, we have 2 little girls at my school who are from Guatemala and only speak their indigenous language. It's been difficult. It's been difficult getting the proper resources for them from our district. I definitely understand. There is definitely power and money and where that money is distributed. And I will say that sometimes we have to write grants. And I know that we're all very busy. Like grant writing is hard. Fundraising and grant writing is something that school librarians definitely have to be adept at. And also like borrowing things from other people, whether it be an open resource that's available online. There's a name for that, and shame on me, I forgot it. And Dr. Kwan will be able to give it to me because my brain freezes while I present. Okay, so what are some strategies that our participants use for helping English learners? They did a lot of data collection. Data collection speaks. And the reason why I encourage you to collect data and do your summaries is because a lot of librarians forget, yes, open education resources. That's what I was talking about. Thank you, Dr. Kwan. A lot of school librarians forget that we also have to establish causality for the services that we offer. When you start speaking to your administrators in terms of academic achievement and those scores that we get, that's when they start listening. They may not listen necessarily if we say words like diversity or collection development, but they will listen when you tell them about academic achievement. Implementing accommodations is also important. If you can be on the team that discusses how to implement individual education plans. When I was a school librarian, I served on those teams. They're important. And also because English learners are placed in special education in disproportionate numbers. They're often mistaken for not being intelligent, but that is not true. The information is not being broken down for them in their language. They do tutoring or set up tutoring programs, community outreach, fundraising and grant writing. They implement different types of technology. They do collection development. That's something that comes natural to us. They're collaborating with the ESOL teachers. They're helping to develop the curriculum for their schools and implementing programming. So Stacy Milburn, had some ideas that she shared in terms of grade specific things that we can do or grade level specific things. For example, you might want to implement a makerspace, implement different lessons with students, have family literacy nights. In secondary school, you might teach students about digital citizenship or how to evaluate resources or provide them with research assistance. For all grade levels, I'm just going to include the fact that I'm going to reiterate that experiential learning is important. So when you're getting volunteers for the library, bring them in as well so that you are making them an integral part of the school culture, so that they can interact with other students and they're getting that volunteer experience. We reach them through our collection development by providing them with interesting books, literacy support, and vocabulary development. Now to what you've been waiting for. Oh my gosh, it's finally here. So let me tell you about this toolkit. It's not finished. It's a work in progress. And most likely, let me stop my share for a moment. Well, not most likely. Yeah, most likely. You'll find a typo or two in there because I need to hire an editor, and we'll do so in the future, but not before I get feedback. We don't want to create a toolkit that people can't use. So we're collecting feedback for the toolkit. So here is the first draft of the toolkit, and every so often I will, or we will update it and put a new version on the website. You can read the toolkit now, but you can't necessarily download it. Here's the link for it. And of course, this toolkit will be followed up with the white paper. So these are the subjects that have been included in the toolkit. Teaching English learners using audio tools, teaching English learners using visual cues, using multisensory experiences and experiential learning, using educational technology, creating student advisory boards, community outreach best practices, developing inclusive learning environments, foreign language collection development, the criteria for evaluating English learner-friendly resources, how to engage in a culturally relevant way, fundraising and advocacy, utilizing social media, and then we have 35 translation tools and student-friendly tutorial reading sources for different languages. So when you go to page 35, when you start looking at these lists in the toolkits, there are descriptions of each tool in the list. We do have additional tools and resources that we're going to put in. For example, we'll be providing elevator speeches that reference English learners, signage for school libraries, video read alouds, and how to start a tutorial program. When you go to each area of the toolkit, you'll find a brief introduction, except for with those lists.